I am resident of Colwood for YouTube Dual Stains. I'm joined by my buddy Alan Gallant, my buddy Gordon Dymowski, my buddy Patrick McCray. We are here to review Quiz Show. Um, pretty interesting movie. Um, when did you guys first watch this movie, Alan?
Movie theaters. 1994 was one of those movies that came out with enough of a publicity um, campaign to grab my attention. So I
Mm-hmm.
said, well, why not?
Yep,
And
same here.
yeah, I mean, it's with a great cast. I had Robert Redford, doing the directing and everything else, and overseeing getting it done and all of that. I figured it couldn't be too bad, and I was right.
Gordon, when did you first see this?
I saw in the theaters as well back in '94. Um it intrigued me enough, especially since the premise was based on an actual historical scandal involving game shows. So I thought it would be that kind of piqued my interest. And it's always been one of my favorite. It's not a go-to movie, but every once in a while it's like, yeah, I want to see this again because I think especially now there's a lot about it that resonates. That it kind of resonated differently in the 90s, but more in I think it was kind of one of those both as kind of a commentary on contemporary times, but also as kind of an examination of like morality and character and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely, and the pressures that can go against ethics and morality in any given situation like this, where there's a lot of money at stake. There's a lot of inspiration for shortcutting situations, and obviously, at the time this movie came out, most of the major players were still alive.
Mm-hmm.
Charles Van Doren was still alive.
Herb Stempel.
Yep, Herb Semple was still alive. Dick Goodwin was still alive. Doris Kearns Goodwin's husband. They, he was majorly involved in politics after this, and his wife, his second wife, is the famous historian. So yeah, it very very much peppered with a lot of history of the era. It was a good topic, I think. I mean, this was all happening when Redford was first coming up as an actor too, so I'm sure it was something that he
Mm-hmm.
knew a lot about at the time.
Patrick, when did you first see this movie?
So in 1997, I was managing a video store, and I had a little monitor, and I was able to catch up on movies. And it was one of those movies that I've been too busy in graduate school to see. But I it was like Nixon or something like that. I was able to catch up with it in that format. And I mean, I liked it. It's a good piece of investigative journalism. It's appropriate to come from the star of All the President's Men. Very appropriate. It's a good movie about not only game shows but journalism and a lot of issues about uh, the need for Gentiles to appear successful after outsmarting those crafty Jews,
Oh
which
yes,
is one of the major themes of the movie.
yeah,
However, I also feel like it is for me a movie I have to be reminded exists. I mean, in this is to juxtapose it against something that came out right around the same time, which was Ed Wood, and which is an unforgettable film, and something legitimately new. I know this discussion isn't about Ed Wood, but I couldn't get the people in my program to see Ed Wood because they're all busy going to see Quiz Show, and I kind of said, 30 years from now, it'll take Robert Redford dying for you to be discussing Quiz Show, but you're probably still going to be quoting Ed Wood. And I was right. That does not make this a bad film. That's just a little bit of personal baggage that I have that I carry with me.
there you go. There you go. I carry similar baggage about certain films too, so
Mm-hmm.
understandable.
Yeah, it's one of those films that you kind of put on a library shelf and you forget it's there until you think one day, oh, maybe I should watch that again.
Hmm.
Because it is, I mean, it was successful in its time, but I think, and I think it's something that a lot of modern movies, including modern independent movies, don't really have. Is I mean, we've done the whole docudrama to death, but there's a real sense of the story behind the story with this, that it's not just, hey, let's throw some references. It's like Redford is really saying some really interesting things about how far will people are willing to go for fame, how far people, um, when you get attention and then it's taken away, how do you deal with that? How
Yeah.
do you participate in a system knowing that it's corrupt and that something's off without necessarily adopting that whole skin? And ironically, um, the funny thing is, this past weekend I went to see um, Speed Racer. A friend of mine Mike Albright runs down in front. They did their whole riff on the movie. And what's interesting is, even though the movie's visuals haven't really aged well, and it was fun to hear sarcastic comments about it, but the story is really, and I think Quiz Show kind of has a similar tone. Speed Racer was about, okay, um, you know, it's about what motivates you. If you're not going to do things for the money, what's going to motivate you to do them?
Hmm.
And I think Quiz Show kind of speaks to that, not just in terms of greed, but also in terms of reputation, because, Herb Stempel is presented as kind of a Weasley, unsympathetic character, and Charles Van Doren is framed as almost the hero. But when you get to the end, you kind of realize they're both kind of the same guy, if you think of it.
Yeah, it's not I mean, obviously Stemple would like to have the money to be independent from his wealthy in-laws. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously that's what he's dealing with. Um, but that's about personal pride, wanting to be independent and all of those things, which is a more important issue there. And this obviously Charlie Van Doren has no need of money, but wanted, yeah, something. He deep down inside, he must have wanted the attention too,
Hmm.
because he had everything else in life. He had stability in his life. He had a great job, teaching at a top university. But again, maybe he wanted to make his own way, as he says in that last speech, that he was sort of standing on the shoulders of life, or he felt that he was, and wanted to make his own way.
No
And
one, no one, I believe in academia, even in the loftiest positions, um, would could think of no job they wouldn't turn it down. There's going to be something they would turn it down for in a
right,
second, and would secretly reveal, yes, this is what I really wanted to be doing. I'm firmly convinced of that.
yeah, and I mean, Charlie was a second or third generation of a very, very famous literary family, and he was kind of like, it's Mark Van Doren's son. It's whatever. His uncle also was very,
Maybe, maybe.
yeah. So I mean, I mean, they kind of intimate that in this movie, but what Charles Van Doren's actual motives were, you know, that's up for debate. I think, yeah, yeah, and certainly that could, you know,
Boom. I first saw this movie in 2002 on TV, uh, on
yeah,
AMC. So,
yes, it made the rounds. It made the cable rounds, especially. I know
Hmm.
that it's one of those movies that was popular on cable. It was in rotation for a while.
it was nice to see. It was nice to see Martin Scorsese in this movie.
Yeah, that was yeah, there you go. And one of his rare forays into acting. He's done a few. He's certainly done a
I,
few.
I'll tell you my favorite cameo director in a movie. He kind of criticized himself for this when Wes Craven was in A New Nightmare, and he was being interviewed by by somebody, and they were watching the movie, and he said, "What would you say about your performance?" Was he said, "Don't quit your day job."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, Scorsese, I think he's in that limited series, The Studio.
He's
Playing
in Curb Your
hilariously,
Enthusiasm.
he's playing himself. Yeah.
Yeah, he's very good in Curb Your Enthusiasm as himself.
Yeah.
And his best performance is in Taxi Driver,
Yeah.
a very disturbed passenger.
Yes. Yes.
which I thought was funny, but great movie,
Taxi
man.
Driver is.
Yes.
A New Nightmare is too. Um, very great movie. So, yeah, I'm gonna tell you something about this movie. I will say this, that as somebody who grew up watching wrestling, um, I gotta tell you, I don't see the big deal of the whole scandal because when you learn that even UFC rigged some of its events, I mean, who cares? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, I mean, if it had been presented as, sort of a fictional entertainment, yeah, I mean, do whatever you want. But
yeah,
that's the whole problem was at this time there was actually a code of ethics in television.
yeah,
And there was also some legal issues with doing this because of the way, the it was just
Yeah.
because of the money involved, I think, more than anything else. There's lots of money involved when it comes to advertising and all this sort of thing. Of course, the networks got away scot-free,
hmm
and everybody else's reputation was trashed.
hmm And you have to keep in mind, Joel, this was 1954. Television was a relatively new medium. It would be like, dealing with, when Netflix and you started seeing all these streaming um, services pop up. Television, you knew that what happened in front of that camera was really happening. Um, so you knew, and most TV was live. Very little was taped and then represented. And with game shows, what you had were, you basically, with wrestling, it's one thing because all you really risk is like a big old belt that just goes from person to person. And now I think we're savvy enough to know, yeah, those, although the fighting might be real, everything else is scripted, including the outcome.
Yeah.
Here, the assumption was, if you've got first off, if you've got two people competing for knowledge, which is something amazing that we don't value in this time. It's more trivia than it is actual knowledge.
Mhm.
The second thing, and the movie makes this point, is that there's a little bit of, okay, we'll put someone who's, I'll just say it out loud. You put someone who's Jewish on, let them win a while, then you replace them with a Gentile. But then once that Gentile, once that non-Jewish person wins and you let them win more, then it's not an honest person to person, how much do you know? It becomes this kind of you're an actor in a role versus you're a contestant in a game show. And
You're also
that's what,
manipulating an audience and calling it the truth.
right.
No.
And I think part of, I think part of what Redford was reaching for, especially since in the early 90s, you started seeing, cable, cable had always been around, but like I know Chicago didn't get major cable until like the late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So you're seeing, and you're also seeing an increasing amount of ad spends into television at that time. So I think, what Redford was trying to do is talk about, what happens when you turn something that should be a contest into something that's essentially programming,
yeah,
and if you look at the two, Stemple and Van Doren, um, you have two men who are essentially they get a certain amount of attention. They play the game, as it were. They get a certain amount of attention, of money, and of fame. Um, The difference is Stempel didn't get the fame because he's I want a panel show. Give me a panel show. Um, and with Van Doren, he's like, oh, he's going to educate the world, and he sees and that kind of attention when you're basically opening up that kind of platform for anybody, um, it can be very corrupting. And the other thing it can do is if you really want to maintain that attention, you got to figure out how do I keep getting that because that's all I know. I mean, Stempel, was basically shut out. And Van Doren basically at the end we hear okay he can't teach at Columbia, he's lost his job. I mean, eventually he worked for Encyclopedia Britannica, so he did well.
Yeah, and
Um,
he wrote and edited books too.
mhm,
So he did okay for himself, but it was a enormous disappointment, um,
mhm,
for his family and for himself. It was personal embarrassment, obviously. None of these people went to jail. Obviously, it was not
mhm,
that kind of a. It was a shady thing that the government wanted to know because it involved communications. It involved hoodwinking the public. It involved the exchange of money that wasn't the same as what was being portrayed on the show.
mhm,
These people were being paid off, but not in the amounts that they were supposedly making on the show. So it was kind of a con, in that respect.
mhm.
Would you like, okay, would you chalk it up to something that's as bad as maybe point shaving, for example? Or,
Well,
It's
it's a
it
different kind of thing. It's not, wasn't gambling wasn't
okay,
involved or anything like that. Illegal gambling at the time was what made point shaving a criminal activity, a
right.
total criminal activity. Um, in this case, it didn't really reach that level because the public, it was about the public trust, I guess, more than anything else. And the government's, thinking, FCC and all these commissions thinking, well, we need to make sure that this is a squeaky clean operation. That's so in that respect, yeah, public trust respect, it would be similar, but criminally not the same thing because point shaving involved illegal gambling and the mafia was involved,
mhm.
all of that. So a different sort of dynamic there.
And in looking up the history afterwards, Jack Barry, the host, who's also co-producer of, at one point you see Barry Enright, the guy who was
A
hosting the show.
million game shows. It was like Goodson Todman, you
Yeah.
know.
And he Enright and the guy that Hank Azaria played, Freeman,
Yes.
eventually were like within a year or two were suspended from NBC. They could not work um at all for the
Yeah.
network. And
For
they had
years.
they had to basically they did kind of, basically the production level of scut work before they said, "Oh, hey, let's do this new game show for CBS," which they did. And um, so it wasn't like they left unscathed, but yeah, it's when you have essentially the producers helping their contestants cheat and playing the contestants against each other and having them willingly get involved in the cheating. It's not like say reality TV where you sign a release because you know that they'll edit,
They're going to manipulate it. Yeah. You
yeah.
already know that. They're being upfront with the people that are on the show as well. Even though everybody's pretty savvy about reality TV now, but when it was first out, people weren't in the audience weren't as savvy
Hmm.
about what was happening at first. But the people that were involved in it they were all paid to be in conflict with one another, figure out something to be mad about, or whatever. They were being manipulated that way, but knowingly. So
And anytime you see the word produce, there's a producer on a TV show. You got to question the reality of the
well,
reality.
yeah, if it's a reality show with a producer, they're also basically writing it.
Yeah,
And it's written. I mean, it's not totally written, but they have a storyboard, a storyline that they want to follow, and they figure out pretty quick who's oil and who's water so that they can create
Hmm.
drama.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like professional wrestling in that sense, only it's a lot more scummy.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I said that when my brother was watching The Real World. I said, "You do realize like they're acting, some of these people?" I said, "They're, you know." And he said, "Why do you say?" I said, "Number one, there's a producer." I said, "Dude," I said, "Come on." I said, "No way."
Yeah.
And later on, they admitted all that shit.
Oh yeah. I mean, the real world was the first big one, I guess.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I do love that they do sort of get into culture with this movie. Because Martin
Absolutely.
Scorsese's character talks about that a bit, which I thought, okay, that was very interesting. I was not expecting that within the frame of this movie. I do love the Redford shot selections. I mean, he directs this movie from a shot wise beautifully. I mean, it looks absolutely gorgeous to watch.
Yeah, Redford was a good storyteller
Yeah,
uh, in those terms, I thought. But you're right. Culturally, you've got two things going on. You do have the Jewish experience in New York, and you have the Goyim experience. But you also have respected, wealthy over here, and you have kind of a more working class over here. So you've got those clashes happening there. I mean, we in the committee meeting, they basically all of them except for the working class guy on the committee are congratulating Van Doren for his honesty, even though they're kind of being shitty to Stemple. They're questioning his sanity. They're doing this. They're doing that. Um, so it's pretty obvious what the prejudices are there.
Hmm. Yeah, and it takes the guy who says I'm from a different part of New York,
Yeah.
and I'm just so surprised that although yeah, I commend you for your actions, I can't believe how much my colleagues are basically gushing over you for telling the
Right.
truth, and he gets applause.
Yeah. He does.
yeah,
He does. And
yeah.
that's that's I think that sets it for Charles in terms of, yeah, I really need to think this through even more than I already have in terms of what my responsibility was towards this. Because he was, for that brief moment where they were commending him, he's standing on top of my shoulders again, you know? And the other guy knocks him off and says, "No, no, you got to stop. You got to start over again."
Yeah.
So,
The game show set design, exact from where was that exact from
pretty,
the game
Yep.
show they were taking it
yeah.
from? Or?
Yeah. Yep, that's 21. And they had the soundproof booths and they wore the
Cool.
thingies there, ostensibly to get just to get the questions, but God knows if they were getting other information through those headsets or not. We already know they were being coached beforehand, but you know, the whole
Yeah,
thing was
yeah,
set up to
probably,
be
yeah.
rigged. So,
Hmm. Yeah, for all we know, they could have been listening to Pat Boone. I mean,
God, that would be distracting. Uh,
um, what's some of you guys' favorite scenes in this movie, Patrick?
Uh, eh, I don't know. I saw the movie a long time ago. There's a good one with Rafe Fiennes. I remember.
yes, yes. Um,
Go ahead, Alan.
the entire committee scene's great. It's a development of what has gone before. Um, you get Goodwin sitting there, almost agog because he realizes through his wife that he was trying to save the waspy guy and throw over the ethnic guy. And he and his wife points it out to him that, what are you doing? Why are you giving this guy so many breaks? I mean, he did the same exact thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that sort of dynamic that's unfolding in front of him in his realization of what's happening. And which is why he changes course in his career basically after that. But also the scene in which the two Van Doren men, when Charles finally admits to his father, Mark, that this has been going on. And his father is like, his father's sympathetic to a degree. I mean, I think he's a little horrified, but he's also sympathetic. And the layers that are played in that scene between the two men are really, really interesting, rich layering there. Although his dad, you can see where Van Doren gets his sort of narrow field. He gets it from his father because his father keeps going, it's really important. You just get back to teaching. You need to get back to teaching. And of course, the irony is that's not going to be available to him anymore. Yeah. So they're both kind of naive when it comes to that.
Gordon?
Yeah, I think I would say the committee scene is one, especially at the end when Stemple is offered the opportunity to take a photo with his rival, and he says, "Are you kidding me? Can't you see the guy?" And he says, "The only time you ever leave us alone is when you leave us alone." But I think any of the scenes with Paul Scofield as the father and Ray Fiennes work, even the crowd scenes, because you get the sense it's not like Mark Scofield disapproves of his son, but you get a sense of there's a tension there, and you're never quite sure what it is, and I like that. It's never like, oh, I disapprove because you're on TV, or I disapprove because there's a dynamic there. You're just not sure what it is, and I think that's what it makes the film a little bit more somewhat more watchable, because it's played as ambiguous, and I think it never. This is a movie that could have easily tipped its hat in saying one guy's the good guy, one guy's the bad guy. I think this is just a case where two guys with event, they got lost in events, and this is where they end up.
Right. And that's another thing, when you see Stemple looking at him in the crowd of reporters, you realize that he has some sympathy for the guy. That after all this time thinking that he was his enemy, that he was the bad guy, he realizes that that's not the case, that this whole system is the bad guy.
One of my favorite scenes is when the teacher, the guy, before he joins the game show, and Stemple answers a question. He's like, "How did he know that?"
Yeah,
because they're watching it on TV.
Yes, the little irony there, yeah. Which is to also show that everybody was watching that show by that time. I mean, everybody had heard of it. It cut through a lot of different layers of society, and even though these guys were that the family was a total, they were academic snobs in a way, although they're portrayed as being more dimensional than that, obviously, but they are, and they wouldn't normally be watching silly game shows on television, except that thing was riveting at the time.
Yeah. Let's see.
I remember when Jack Barry came back to television with The Joker's Wild in the 70s, and that was when they all kind of came back for a while. They became successful again and made, as they said at the end of it, they made millions of dollars. But it was like 20 years in the making, and they were out. They're on the outs for a long, long time.
I like the scene where they're trying to get him to throw things over Marty, and he takes umbrage at that. I could see that happening.
That was Redford trying to get him motivated, I guess, or something.
Well, no, but that is the sort of thing that's such a softball. and then they they try to rationalize it with this narrative that they're attempting to
Sure,
make.
sure.
Well, ironically, that's the historical truth. That's the
Yeah, I know.
question they wanted him to, and they could have done something they could have omitted that and just had him throw it and have him say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know." But I think it's interesting that with Stemple, they give him the question that at the time would have been the easiest to answer.
Basically humiliation
Right.
because
And
he's a
then
smart guy.
Right. And then with Van Doren, they give him the name the four kings of Norway, Sweden, something something, and Ruritania.
Yeah,
And he chokes on the last one.
yeah.
And
So he even looks good in losing. But he
Mhm.
looks even better in losing. Um, and I um, I thought that I mean the whole thing is a real good elaboration on it. But I thought again Marty did a great job being the sneaky diplomat in that interrogate sort of semi-interrogation scene where he's
Mhm.
with uh, Goodwin and Goodwin's trying to pin him down. There's no way he's gonna. Nah, this guy knows what he's doing. He knows everything about everything, and he's too smart to get suckered into confessing anything. And that's a pretty fair representation of the network and the lawyers, and obviously in his case,
Mhm.
he's the major executive for the advertiser Geritol of all things, and he is just as sharp as a snake.
John Turturro did a really great job playing Billy Martin. Uh, wow, back. Miniseries by ESPN. Really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, former Yankees manager.
Oh, you're talking about the Bronx Zoo, that miniseries?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Uh,
Yes, yes, yeah.
I also like John Turturro in the Transformers movies is just funny. He's like playing a government man.
Yes.
um,
Well, Totoro is perfectly cast for this role. I mean, he
yeah,
balances it, and you think, what a schmuck, what a schmuck, what a schmuck. And then you start to see the layers peel away, why he's the way he is, and what kind of situation he was put in as well, and then he's just coming at it differently because he has a different life experience.
yeah.
But yeah, they do. Obviously, they've got Van Doren. His hair is perfect, and he looks so beautiful, and that's why they put him on the show in the first place. Is because he's this handsome guy, and he's represents the best of America, as opposed to Stempel, who represents sort of the working class, and he's Jewish, and that's not good enough. Once we find somebody better.
Uh, what do you guys give this movie?
I really think, in terms of storytelling, it's a 10.
Yeah, I'll give it a 10 out of 10.
I really enjoy the layers as they get peeled away of these people, and when things start getting exposed, and how going along it's not going to work ultimately. And I like Goodwin's tenacity in the whole thing too. So I probably wouldn't have come to anything unless he'd been tenacious enough to sort of prod some people and look under some rugs.
Patrick, what do you give this, man?
10.
Cool. I give it a 7 out of 10. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Uh, so, is there anything you guys want to add about the movie before we go?
I think it's a good representation of Redford's work as a director. I do
Hmm.
think that there's a lot of his work that's readily available in watching it when you pay attention to it for that reason.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think that it's wise to look at this in in the light of the first episode of Nathan Fielder's landmark television series, The Audition. The first season, first episode deals with something that echoes this tremendously. And if you haven't seen it, it's quite a remarkable piece of television, and it deals with cheating and sort of game shows and things like that, and character in a very startling way.
Yeah, it's that one's based on a true story as well, is it not?
The Audition,
Yeah,
the audition's all true,
yeah, that's
as
what I
far as
thought.
we know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I thought.
But I think Fielder may have been engineering something to echo some of the events and some of the feelings of Quiz Show.
Sure.
But he's doing it with the um, uh, the neuroatypical, that brings up a very 21st century take on sort of the class structure in that.
Yeah.
It's a really astonishing miniseries. Really quite good.
Is there anything you just want to do tomorrow?
I'm gonna be good with taking the day off tomorrow, I think. I
Yep,
got some
so
stuff
am
to
I.
do. So
Links to Patrick McCray's Dark Shadows A Book of Bound is going to be in the description box. Link to Gordon Dymowski's Amazon page is going to be in the description box. Link to Alan Gallant's YouTube channel, Colin Sport After Dark, is going to be in the description box. You guys have a great night. Stay safe.
Night all.
have a good one, guys.